I still remember the exact time of that first message. 8:17 a.m., April 3rd, 2022. I was standing in my kitchen, waiting for the kettle to finish its slow, irritated whistle. The kind that sounds like it's complaining about being alive. The morning light came through the blinds and thin, cutting the table into neat rectangles. On the table, my pill organizer, Tuesday slot open, 2 white tablets already gone, 1 still waiting. Blood pressure doesn't negotiate. My phone buzzed against the laminate surface. A short, nervous vibration. Not a call. She never called in the mornings anymore. Emily, Dad, I hate to ask, but could you help me out just this once? It's just a small loan, $3,500. I'll pay you back next month, I promise. Just this once. That phrase has a way of aging badly. I poured the water into my chipped blue mug, the one Margaret bought in 1998, when mugs still came from real stores and not online carts, and sat down slowly, my knees giving that familiar protest. 72 years old, and every movement is a negotiation with gravity. I read the message twice, then a third time, like maybe the number would shrink if I stared long enough. $3,500. Not a small amount. Not for a man who lives off a pension of $2,900 a month and a savings account that used to look more comforting before it started being useful. I typed, "What's going on?" 3 dots appeared almost immediately. Just a temporary thing. Mortgage timing issue. We're short this month. I'm so embarrassed even asking. Embarrassed. I smiled at that. Not kindly. Just tired. When Emily was 12, embarrassed meant asking me to pick her up 2 blocks away from school so her friends wouldn't see my old Ford. When she was 25, embarrassed meant asking for $10,000 for a wedding venue she absolutely needed. Now it was $3,500. Progress, I suppose. I stood up, walked to the counter, and opened the drawer where I kept my checkbook. Yes, a checkbook. I trust paper more than apps. Paper doesn't disappear when someone forgets to tell you something. The drawer smelled faintly of dust and old receipts. Electric bills from 2019. A warranty for a microwave that died in 2021. Life reduced to paper trails. I hesitated. There's always a moment, a small, quiet moment where something inside you clears its throat and says, wait. But then I pictured her, my daughter, my only child. I picked up the pen. Sent. I texted her at 8:42 a.m. after arranging the transfer through my bank's website. Slow, clunky, like everything honest. Dad, thank you. I'll send it back by May 1st. I swear, May 1st. I wrote it down. Yes, I started writing things down even then. Not because I didn't trust her. Because I've lived long enough to know memory is a polite liar. By April 10th, the money was gone from my account. By May 1st, nothing came back. No message. No explanation. Just silence. Stretched thin over days like cheap plastic wrap. On May 3rd, at 9:26 p.m., my phone buzzed again. Dad, I'm so sorry. I need a little more time. Things got complicated. Also, could you maybe help with another $5,000? Just until June. I'll pay everything back together. I stared at the screen for a long time. The television murmured in the background. Some news anchor talking about inflation, rising costs, numbers that meant nothing until they landed in your own kitchen. $3,500 had already become $8,500. And suddenly, without asking my permission, it no longer felt like a loan. It felt like a pattern. I leaned back in my chair, the wood creaking under my weight, and said out loud, to no one in particular, small. The room didn't answer, but something had already begun. June came without ceremony. No envelope in the mailbox. No notification sound from a bank. No awkward message starting with Dad, I didn't forget. Just keep pressing against the windows and the slow, sticky passage of days. I stopped expecting May 1st sometime around May 12th. That's how these things happen. Not with a sharp break, but with a quiet adjustment. You don't say she didn't pay me back. You say she's probably busy. You give it another week, then another. If you believe older voices still matter, support this channel with a like and a subscription. By June 3rd, the number in my notebook read, April 3rd, $3,500. May 3rd, $5,000. Total, $8,500. I kept the notebook in the same drawer as the checkbook. Blue cover, cheap paper. The kind you buy in a pack of 3 and never expect to matter. It mattered. The next message came at 7:11 a.m., June 5th. Earlier than usual. Dad, I know this is terrible timing, but we're in a real bind. The bank messed something up with the escrow account. We're short $12,000, and they're threatening penalties. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't serious. I read that one standing up. No coffee yet. No pills. Just me, the kitchen, and $12,000 sitting in the middle of the room like an uninvited guest. $12,000. Not a small loan anymore. Not even pretending. I typed slowly, deliberately. What exactly happened with the escrow? The reply came after 3 minutes. Longer than usual. Honestly, it's complicated. I don't even fully understand it. Mark is dealing with the bank, but they need the money by Monday. Mark, my son-in-law, a man who shook my hand too firmly the first time we met and called me sir with the kind of respect that sounds rehearsed. He worked in finance. That's what Emily always said, as if the word itself explained everything. Finance. And yet somehow always short on money. I made eggs that morning, burned them slightly, ate them anyway. There's a particular taste to overcooked eggs. Dry, stubborn, unwilling to be pleasant. It stayed in my mouth while I logged into my bank account. Balance. $214,600. It used to be $280,000 3 years ago, before the wedding, before the helping out, before I started telling myself that money is just money and family is something else. I transferred the $12,000 at 8:02 a.m. No ceremony, no speech, just a click and a confirmation number. Dad, you saved us. I mean it. This is the last time. Once this is sorted, we'll be fine. June 5th, 8:07 a.m. 5 minutes later. I wrote it down. By the end of June, the notebook had another entry. June 28th, $8,000. That one came with a shorter message. Unexpected medical bill. Insurance didn't cover everything. I'll explain later. No explanation ever came. The pattern, once you see it, is almost elegant. The messages always arrived early in the morning or late at night, times when people are softer, more willing to say yes, just to avoid carrying something heavy into the day or into sleep. The amounts grew, but not too fast. Not enough to shock, just enough to stretch. $3,500, $5,000, $12,000, $8,000, like steps on a staircase you didn't realize you were climbing. I started noticing small things. Emily's voice on the phone, brighter than it should have been for someone in constant financial crisis. Background noises. Once I heard clinking glasses. Laughter. Not the kind you have when the bank is threatening penalties. Are you okay? I asked her that night. Of course, Dad. Why wouldn't I be? A pause, and softer. You worry too much. Maybe I did. But I also started keeping the bank statements on the table longer before filing them away. Started reading the transaction confirmations twice instead of once. Started paying attention. On July 14th, I added another line. July 14th, $25,000. That one didn't come as a request. It came as a phone call. And that was the first time I heard panic in her voice. Real panic, or something very close to it. Dad, if we don't cover this by tomorrow, we could lose the house. Lose the house. Such a clean, devastating phrase. I didn't answer right away. I looked at the notebook instead, at the numbers, at the dates, at the neat, careful handwriting of a man who had spent his life believing that if you keep records, things make sense. The total now stood at $53,500. I pressed my thumb against the edge of the page, feeling the paper bend. Dad, she said again, sharper this time. Are you there? I closed my eyes. Yes, I said. And even as I reached for the pen again, something in me, quiet, patient, and no longer entirely trusting, whispered. It's adding up faster than she thinks. There's a particular kind of clarity that only comes when something slips. Not breaks, not shatters, just slips. Quietly, carelessly, like a word said too quickly, or a message sent to the wrong person. It happened on August 2nd, 2022, 2:14 p.m. I was sitting in my living room, the fan humming in the corner, pushing warm air around without conviction. On the coffee table, my glasses, the TV remote, and that same blue notebook, now open more often than it stayed closed. My phone buzzed. A message from Emily, but it wasn't meant for me. Mark, the transfer from Dad cleared. That's another 25. We're good for Cabo now. Just don't mention it to him. He's starting to ask questions. I read it once, then again, then a third time, slower, as if the meaning might rearrange itself into something less precise. It didn't. Cabo. I actually said it out loud. Cabo. The word sat in the room like a stain. 3 minutes later, another message. Dad. Ignore that last text. Wrong chat, lol. Anyway, how are you feeling today? Oh, I stared at that. Not the mistake. Not even the lie. Oh, I didn't answer right away. Instead, I reached for the notebook. My hand was steady. That surprised me. I turned to a fresh page and began writing everything down again. But this time slower, cleaner, like I was preparing something for someone else to read. April 3rd, $3,500. May 3rd, $5,000. June 5th, $12,000. June 28th, $8,000. July 14th, $25,000. Total. $53,500. And now, Cabo. I got up, walked to the kitchen, and poured myself a glass of water. Didn't drink it, just held it, watching the condensation gather and drip onto the counter. A vacation, while telling me they might lose the house. I laughed, not loudly, just once. Dry, efficient, I muttered. That evening, I did something I hadn't done before. I called her, not to respond, not to reassure, to listen. She picked up on the second ring. Hey, Dad, I was just thinking about you. Of course you were. I got your message, I said. A pause. Barely noticeable, but it was there. Oh, yeah, that was embarrassing. You know how it is, I send things too fast sometimes. Too fast. Yes, I said. That happens. I let the silence stretch. People fill silence. It's one of their most reliable weaknesses. So how are you? She added quickly. I'm fine, I said. Just going over my finances. Another pause. Longer this time. Well, don't stress yourself out, okay? You've always been so careful. Careful. I looked at the notebook. Yes, I said quietly. I have. After the call, I didn't turn on the TV. I sat at the table instead, under the yellow light that makes everything look slightly older than it is, and opened my laptop. The bank website took its usual time loading, like an old man climbing stairs. I went through every transaction, every transfer, dates, confirmation numbers, recipients. I printed them, one by one. The printer whined and clicked, spitting out pages that felt heavier than paper should. By 9:40 p.m., I had a stack. Not thick, not dramatic, just undeniable. Then I noticed something else, a smaller detail, easy to miss. On June 28th, the medical bill. The transfer hadn't gone to Emily. It went to a joint account, Emily Carter and Mark Carter. Of course it did. I just hadn't looked closely enough before. I leaned back in my chair, the wood pressing into my spine. For a long time, I had been thinking in terms of helping my daughter. But the numbers didn't say that. The numbers said something else entirely. They said, $53,500 and growing. They said, planned, repeated, shared. They said, you are not helping. You are being used. At 10:12 p.m., my phone buzzed again. Love you, Dad Redheart. I looked at the message, then at the stack of printed transactions, then at the notebook, and for the first time since April 3 RD, 8:17 a.m., something inside me settled into place. Not warm, not forgiving, not even angry. Just precise. I picked up a pen and wrote one more line at the bottom of the page. August 2nd, truth. $0 returned. Then I closed the notebook. Careful, like a file that was no longer personal, but evidence. The next morning, I woke up at 5:52 a.m. No alarm. At my age, sleep doesn't end. It just gives up. The house was quiet in that particular way that only comes before sunrise. Even the refrigerator seemed to hum softer, as if it respected the hour. I sat on the edge of the bed for a moment, letting my feet find the floor, feeling that familiar stiffness settle into my joints like an old argument. Then I stood up and went straight to the desk. No coffee first. No pills. Work. By 6:15 a.m., the notebook was open. The printed bank statements were stacked neatly to the right, aligned by date. I had even clipped them. 3 black binder clips I found in the back of a drawer, still in their original packaging. Order matters. Not for them. For me. I drew a line down the center of a fresh page. On the left, date/amount. On the right, reason given. Slowly, carefully, I began reconstructing the story she had told me. April 3rd, $3,500. Mortgage timing issue. May 3rd, $5,000. Complications. June 5th, $12,000. Escrow problem. Urgent. June 28th, $8,000. Medical bill. July 14th, $25,000. Risk of losing the house. I stopped there. Read it again. If you write lies down neatly enough, they start to look like a plan. At 7:02 a.m., I made coffee. Black. No sugar. Margaret used to say I drank it like punishment. Maybe I did. I carried the mug back to the desk and opened my laptop again. This time, I didn't go to the bank first. I went to something else. Public records. Property records, specifically. I still remember the address. You don't forget where your child lives, even when you're not entirely sure who they become. It took longer than it should have. The website clunky. The search fields unforgiving. But eventually, the record appeared. Status, active. No foreclosure filings. No delinquent notices. I leaned back slowly. No risk of losing the house, I said to the empty room. Not even close. At 8:11 a.m., I called Margaret. Not my late wife. My accountant. She answered on the third ring. Her voice already alert in that way professionals learn to be. Good morning. Everything okay? No, I said. But it will be. A pause. That sounds serious. I need to go over some transfers, I continued. Personal. Over the last 4 months. How much are we talking? I looked at the page. $53,500. Silence. Then, sharper. That's not casual assistance. No, I said. It isn't. We met that afternoon at 2:30 p.m. I enter office. Small, precise, everything labeled. Even the air felt organized. I laid the documents out in front of her. One by one. She didn't interrupt. Didn't react immediately. Just read. That's what I liked about her. She respected facts more than feelings. After 15 minutes, she leaned back. Are these gifts or loans? She asked. Loans, I said. Every time. Documented. Messages. Dates. Promises to repay. She nodded slowly. And the Cabo message? I slid my phone across the desk. She read it. Her lips pressed into a thin line. That helps, she said. Helps? Such a polite word for something ugly. What are my options? I asked. She folded her hands. Well, she began carefully, legally, if you can establish a pattern of misrepresentation, especially if the funds were requested under false pretenses, you may have grounds for civil action. Civil action. I repeated it in my head. Not revenge. Not anger. Action. And if I do nothing? I asked. She looked at me directly. Then it continues, she said. Because right now, from their perspective, it's working. Working. Of course it was. When I got home, the house felt different. Not colder. Not emptier. Clearer. I placed the documents back on the table, aligned them again, and added one more item to the stack. A blank page. At the top, I wrote, total to date, $53,500. Projected pattern. Increasing. Then, after a moment, I added, next request. Inevitable. At 6:47 p.m., my phone buzzed. Right on schedule. Dad, I didn't want to bother you again, but something came up. I didn't open the message. Not immediately. Instead, I sat down, picked up my pen, and waited. Because now, for the first time since this began, I wasn't reacting. I was preparing. I let it ring twice. Not because I was busy. Not because I didn't hear it. Because timing, I had learned, changes everything. Dad, Emily's voice came through bright. Just a little too quick. Did you see my message? I did, I said. I was sitting at the kitchen table again. Same chair. Same mug. Empty this time. In front of me, the notebook open. The documents aligned. My reading glasses resting exactly where I had placed them. Prepared. So, I know this is bad timing, she continued. Her tone shifting into something softer, practiced. But we ran into another issue. The contractor says if we don't pay the remaining balance, $18,000, he's going to put a lien on the house. A lien. Interesting how the words get more technical as the lies get bigger. I see, I said. I didn't write it down. Not yet. It's just temporary, she rushed on. We're expecting a bonus in September, And once that hits, I'll clear everything. All of it. I promise, Dad. September. A new date to replace May, replace June, replace reality. I leaned back slightly, the chair creaking under me. Emily, I said quietly, how's Cabo? Silence. Not long, but long enough. What? She said a little too sharply. Cabo, I repeated. You said you were going. I don't know what you're talking about. Of course you don't. I reached for the paper beside me. Not the notebook this time, but one of the printed pages. August 2 and D.2:14 p.m., I said, reading calmly. The transfer from Dad cleared. That's another 25. We're good for Cabo now. Just don't mention it to him. The line was quiet. Then, that was taken out of context. I smiled, not because it was funny, because it was predictable. Which part? I asked. The transfer or the vacation? You're twisting this, she snapped, her voice tightening. We needed that money, Dad. Things aren't as simple as you think. No, I said. They're simpler. I picked up the notebook, opened to the page. April 3rd, 3,500. Mortgage issue. May 3rd, 5,000. Complications. June 5th, 12,000. Escrow problem. June 28th, 8,000. Medical bill. July 14th, 25,000. Risk of losing the house. I paused. Let it sit between us. Total, I continued, $53,500. Her breathing had changed. Faster now. Dad, why are you doing this? She said. And now there was something else in her voice, not guilt, annoyance, as if I had broken some unspoken agreement. I'm not doing anything, I said. I'm reading. A new voice entered the call, muted at first, then clearer. Mark. I told you he was starting to track it, he said, not bothering to lower his voice enough. So, we were all here now. Put him on, I said. There was a rustle, a hesitation. Then, sir, Mark said, that same rehearsed respect back in place. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Good, I replied. I prefer clarity. I stood up slowly and walked to the window. Outside, nothing had changed. Same quiet street, same parked cars. The world had no interest in this conversation. But inside, everything had shifted. There's no lien, I said. Silence. I checked the property records this morning. No filings. No notices. Nothing. Another silence. Heavier. Financial situations are fluid, Mark said finally. Truth isn't, I replied. I turned back to the table, looked at the documents, at the numbers, at the months of careful, polite deception. You asked for 18,000, I said. You're not getting it. Dad, Emily started. No, I cut in, not loudly, just firmly. We're past that. There it was, the line, drawn clean. You owe me $53,500, I continued. Documented, dated, promised as repayment. That's not fair, she said immediately. You said you wanted to help. I did, I said, and I did. I let that settle, then added quietly, this is me helping myself. Another pause, longer this time. No quick replies, no soft excuses, just calculation. I could almost hear it. You're really going to do this? Mark asked. There it was. Not if. How far? I looked down at the blank page I had prepared earlier, the one waiting for this moment. I already have, I said, and for the first time since April. I ended the call first. The next morning I didn't feel triumphant. That would have been too simple, too clean. What I felt instead was efficient, like a machine that had finally been switched on after months of being used as a shelf. At 9:00 a.m., I was sitting in Margaret's office again. Same chair, same stack of documents. Though now there was one more item added on top. A printed transcript of the call. I had recorded it. Not secretly. Not in some clever cinematic way. Just a simple app. Red button pressed before I answered. Old men learn. Slowly but thoroughly. Margaret adjusted her glasses and skimmed the last page. You were very clear, she said. I was very tired, I replied. She nodded. That helps too. We went over the options again. But this time the conversation had weight. Before, it had been theoretical. Now it had a voice. Their voices. Cabo, lien, misunderstanding. All neatly preserved in digital format. We'll start with a formal demand letter, she said, tapping her pen lightly against the desk. Full amount, $53,500, with a 30-day repayment window. And if they don't respond, they will, she said calmly. People like this always respond when things become official. Official. Such a quiet word for pressure. The letter was drafted by 11:40 a.m. Precise. Cold. Almost elegant in its restraint. No accusations. No emotion. Just facts. Dates. Amounts. Representations. Total owed. And, at the bottom, failure to comply may result in civil litigation. I signed it without hesitation. My hand didn't shake. That surprised me more than anything. It was sent at 12:03 p.m. Email and certified mail. 2 paths. No excuses. They didn't call that day. Not Emily. Not Mark. Silence again. But this time it felt different. Before, silence had been something they gave me. Now it was something I controlled. On the third day, at 6:18 p.m., my phone rang. Mark. Of course. I let it ring once, then answered. Mr. Carter, he began, voice tight, stripped of its usual polish. We received your letter. I assumed you would. This is unnecessary, he continued quickly. We're family. We can resolve this without. You had that option, I said, several times. A pause, then sharper. You're escalating this over a misunderstanding. No, I said. I'm documenting it. There was movement on the other end. A muffled voice, Emily, whispering something urgent. For a moment, I imagined them standing in their kitchen, the same way I had stood in mine months ago, except now the numbers were on their side of the table. We don't have that kind of liquidity right now, Mark said finally. Then you'll find it. That's not how it works. It is now. Silence. Then, what do you want, he asked. There it was. Not denial. Negotiation. I looked down at the paper in front of me, not the letter. Another document Margaret had prepared. Contingency. You refinanced the house in March, I said. Another silence. Heavier this time. How do you? Public records, I replied. Very educational. The truth is they had money, just not the kind they wanted to give back. You have 30 days, I continued. After that, it becomes a court matter. Discovery, subpoenas, full financial review. I let the words settle. Let them picture it. The exposure, the inconvenience, the cost. You're bluffing, he said, but his voice didn't believe it. Am I asked. That night, I slept better than I had in months. Not because I was happy, because things were finally balanced. On the 28th day, a transfer appeared in my account. $53,500. Exact. No message. No apology. Just a number. Returning to where it had always belonged. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I opened the notebook, turned to the last page, and wrote, September 2nd, repaid in full. I closed it gently, not like evidence anymore, like something finished. They didn't call after that, not even once. And strangely, that was the most honest thing they'd done in months. Silence, I've learned, is weight. Not the kind that crushes you. Not anymore. The kind that settles. The house didn't change after the money came back. Same kitchen. Same chipped blue mug. Same faint smell of old paper and overused drawers. The refrigerator still hummed like it had a secret. The clock still ticked louder than it should. But something in the air shifted. Or maybe it was just me. On September 5th, 3 days after the transfer, I went through my usual routine. 6 a.m. wake up. 6:10 pills. 6:20 coffee. I sat at the table and opened the bank app. Not out of anxiety this time, just habit. Balance restored. Not richer. Not poorer. Correct. There's a difference. I expected something. A message, perhaps. Dad, I'm sorry. Or even something smaller. Colder. Glad we could resolve this. But nothing came. No apology. No explanation. Not even resentment. Just absence. I tried calling once. September 7 th.7:32 p.m. It rang 5 times, then voicemail. Hi, it's Emily, leave a message. I didn't. I hung up and placed the phone back on the table with the kind of care I used to reserve for fragile things. It didn't feel fragile anymore. Just finished. People like to believe closure is something you receive. A conversation. A confession. A moment where everything is explained and forgiven in equal measure. That's not how it works. Closure is something you decide. Alone, I started making small changes. Nothing dramatic. I moved the notebook from the drawer to the bookshelf. Not hidden anymore. Not active either. Just archived. I canceled the automatic reminder I'd set months ago. Check Emily repayment. No need. I fixed the kitchen cabinet door that had been crooked since February. Took me 20 minutes and a screwdriver I had to dig out from the garage. Strange. The things you postpone when your attention is somewhere else. On September 12th, I received a piece of mail. No return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper. Printed. No handwriting. No signature. Just one sentence. We hope you're satisfied. I read it once, then again. Then I folded it neatly and placed it back in the envelope. No anger. No reaction. Just confirmation. Satisfied. I thought about that word for a while. That evening I made dinner, something I hadn't done properly in weeks. Pan-fried chicken, a little overcooked. Potatoes with too much salt. A glass of cheap red wine Margaret would have politely criticized. I sat at the table and ate slowly. No television. No phone. Just the quiet. After dinner, I walked to the window. The street looked the same as always. A dog barking 2 houses down. Someone's car headlights sweeping briefly across my living room wall. Life continuing. Indifferent. I realized then that I wasn't angry anymore. Not at Emily. Not at Mark. Anger requires a kind of investment. And I'd already withdrawn everything. At 9:18 p.m., I opened the notebook one last time. Flipped through the pages. Dates. Numbers. Reasons. A neat record of something that used to be trust. I turned to the final page. The last entry. September 2nd. Repaid in full. I added one more line beneath it. Slowly. Carefully. September 12th, no daughter. No debt. I closed the notebook. This time, I didn't place it back on the shelf. I left it on the table. Open. Not as evidence. Not as a warning. Just as a reminder. Some people think money is the most valuable thing you can lose. They're wrong. Money comes back. Sometimes all at once. With interest if you're patient. But trust doesn't return in full. It settles. Like silence. I turned off the light and stood there for a moment in the dark. Then I said quietly, to no one at all, next time I won't be alone. And for the first time in a long while, I meant it. If you believe older voices still matter, support this channel with a like and a subscription.